go ahead and take a second. Those of you remoting, if you will go on to D2L, under class files, go ahead and give this BenBot zipped folder a download and an extract. We're going to be working with BenBot for both this project that we're going to start today, as well as your final. So make sure you give that a good old keepsies. And for those of you in here, you can go onto the server under our animation fundamentals project files. There is a BenBot here, as well as a BenBot zipped if you'd rather take the zip file. You can pick either of those. They shouldn't take too terribly long to download, but go ahead and give those a good old keep somewhere where you can find them later on. Awesome. Jeremy, we're downloading the BenBot zip file from D2L since you're remote. And then once you get that, make sure you open Maya first before you open up BenBot. That way you can set the project for him and then open him up. If you do it in the opposite way, he can break. And we don't want that. Also, while you are, while you are getting those, I'm not entirely sure about the zipped folder, but for those of you here physically, there are a couple of different options you guys can use for the BenBot project. You've got the old 2017 and 18 versions. There's a newer version from 2020. There's one from 2019. There's even some under old from 2014 and 16. The one I'm using and going to use in this class is the BenBot 1.9 from 2018. I just like that one. It's the one I'm going to use, but you can use any of these. They all should work. At the very least, they might say they have mental array nodes. You can just tell it to ignore it no matter what I do. They don't erase. And then you may or may not have to tell it okay about the color space. So once you get those downloaded, give me a thumbs up or a nod if you're physically here. When you have that Maya file all nice and open, got your project all set. All those fun things. That's okay, Alex. Just let me know when you're ready. Once you open Maya, you set your project and open up your file, you should get something that looks like this. Everybody's seeing what I'm seeing. Mine is black and textureless. Go ahead and reset your project. Go to the file, set, project. Set it to that outside BenBot folder, and then do a file open and reopen your project. That should fix it. Sometimes you got to do it twice. Awesome. Okay, so before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and upfront tell you what the project is. We're going to be starting Project 5 together. So if you want to follow along in the class, you can. If you don't want to and want to do it on your own later, you can do that as well. I leave it up to your best judgment. So we're doing a BenBot step. So why would we do this project? Character animation can sometimes be overwhelming. Controls can sometimes, or rigs can sometimes have many, many, many controls. But since we've gone over pose to pose, we're going to be using that same method to get BenBot to either step over a low object or step under a low hanging object. We're also going to work through the first little bit together. That way you guys don't have to work as hard if you want to. We'll be taking a look at some reference, blocking, breakdowns, what on earth is blocking, splining, and polish. And then this will be due rendered Thursday the 5th. And also as an FYI and an aside, my wedding ceremony officially is just as an advance. I won't be here the 12th, 13th, 16th, or 17th. I will be away taking a nap. So should you need me, send me an email. But I will not be here physically. That is after this project is due, but after I have given you all the final. So just as an aside, I'll remind you multiple times. I will not be here in this building or on Zoom. So let's take a look at BenBot himself before we get too terribly started in on me talking at y'all a lot. So this is BenBot. This is BobBot's older brother. Pretty much, he is a nice, very well-rigged little bot here. If we open up our outliner, all of his controls are inside of this TSM3 control right here. You can open that up and see every single one of them. This is really nice because that means you don't have to make a button unless you want to. You can just merely come over here, highlight the first one, scroll down, click the last one, and hit S on the keyboard to set a keyframe. You don't have to make a button, but if you do want to, we've gone over that a few times, and you can make one if you'd like. He also has a whole bunch of controls. I'm going to lock my mesh layer and my environment here so I don't click on anything. He has a nice, good upper head control, a nice, good middle of his spine, lower hips, overall top of his body control, so you can do all three of those at the same time. He also has some eye controls. He does have a focus on where that eye is looking. You can't really tell that on this version of the eyeball. You can look a little bit. He also has a rotation of the eye itself. He has a good shoulder joint. So if you need to roll that shoulder a little bit, you can do so. He has an upper arm control, a nice good old elbow, a nice wrist, and then he has this lollipop and 2 other controls for his fingers. You can select all 3 of those in order to get his palm to roll in and out in tandem, or you can just do one section and roll just that one section. We then have an ankle up, so it rolls from the pad of your foot. We have the same from the toe, rolls up from the toe. We have our overall foot control, which allows you to roll back from the ankle or lift from there as well. Then we have a knee angle and a hip rotation. So it rotates from the hip or rotates from the knee. We also have our overall upper body control. This will allow you to bend him down, lift him up, scoot him forward, backward in space. And then we have the big old master control that you want to put in a spot and leave alone. Now inside of these controls, so on his main kind of boxy square control here, he does have all of his FK, IK switches. So if we switch his left arm from being IK to FK or from FK to IK, we now have these red controls that appear. We have rotation, rotation, moves more like a leg. And we can also do the same thing to the feet. We can swap that from IK to FK. So now we have a different style of motion based off of FK instead of IK. And you can keyframe those and change those as needed. Now do make sure that whenever you are switching between the two, you are still setting IK controls on all of those. He does also have, if you want to play with it, a spine IK FK switch. So should you want to roll him or move him in different ways, for whatever reason, you can also do that. Questions just about BendBot's rig? Okay. So, we talked about in a couple classes ago when we talked about Hobo, that anytime you are creating a character for animation, the animation you are doing is just an acting sequence. Acting is reacting. Remember, anytime we are working with a character, whether it be complicated or less complicated, we still need to work in that see, think, do in that order. This makes your animations overall more believable. Think about if Big Bird were to walk into this lecture right now, we'd first have to see Big Bird. Our brains would have to process and think about why we're seeing Big Bird, and then we would have to react to why we're seeing Big Bird. All of those in that order will help your animations become more believable. Now, because animation is a form of communication, it's an art in and of itself, we're trying to convey different messages to different people. So go ahead, we're going to do a thought experiment. I'm going to try to get something across to you guys, and I want you to think about it, and we'll see if our ideas match. I'm thinking of an apple. Are y'all thinking of an apple? I was thinking of this yellow and red one. Were y'all thinking of a different apple? You were thinking of green, probably red, maybe a weird yellow one that has like maybe green spots instead of red spots. So I was thinking of that one. There's a whole bunch of different ways I could have said this apple, right? And gotten that a bit across to you a little bit more honey crisper the best, accurate. They could have gotten across to you a little bit clearer, right? What we're doing is communicating. Everyone has different life experiences. Everyone's gone through different things. If I think about my mom or my dad, you guys probably instinctively think about your mom or your dad. And even then, it's probably the last time you saw them's comparison. If you were to see them today, you'd be like, that's not the shirt I was thinking of you in, probably. So we have to convey that as clearly as possibly. Now, this could take place in any form of communication. It could be text, a picture, a painting. It could be game design. It could be this animation. It could be in a 3D model. It could be anything. We need to just make sure that we're giving across the correct amount of information for what we're trying to convey. So if I were to, instead of just saying, I'm thinking of an apple, if I say, I'm thinking of an apple that's yellow with some red spots on it, that's a bit more descriptive. It's a bit clearer. And now you probably would think about something like this apple. Or if I say, I'm thinking of one of those big, like Honeycrisp-like apples where they're red and they've got some yellow spots on them, but they're a little bit green still. You immediately know exactly what type of apple I'm telling you. Everything that you convey can be misinterpreted based off whoever is seeing or viewing or ingesting the media that you're putting out there differently based upon their own life experience. So you just want to make sure that it's being clear. So when we are animating, we don't want to repeat things. We don't want to just say it louder. I'm not like, I'm thinking of an apple. It's an apple. Think of an apple. I'm not yelling. I merely just added a little bit more detail. This is what blocking and splining will let your animations do. It'll become clearer, more concise, and will allow you to keep those complications from happening. Now, what different things can we do to make our character clearer? We talked about them last class. Any ideas? Nothing? Nothing? We could make our poses. We could clarify them. Pose clear, yes. We could have good appeal for the pose. We could make the staging a lot clearer. We can add more subtle or exaggerated parts to the pose. So let's go ahead and start. So since I know I'm going to have my BenBot here step over an object, I'm going to make him an object. I will warn you, if you do want to import any FBXs or anything like that into the scene, you are more than welcome to do so. But BenBot is massive. So this is the default cube. It's real small. So if you do import something, just be aware you're going to have to scale it quite a bit in order for it to be visible. So I'm going to make this little box here. I'm going to pull it way far out, make it a little wider. And I'm just going to throw a texture on it. Just going to throw a random Lambert. I'm going to make it like a bluish, tealish color. Like so y'all can see it a little bit better. And now we need to start thinking about how we want to make BenBot interact with this object. Other things real quick that you do need to know about our good friend here, BenBot. If you go into the hypershade, be smaller, be small. I'm going to unlock my mesh here. There we go. I do have 4 different versions of BenBot's texture. Currently, we are working with this material Rusty, but you can also change him to be this kind of yellow dirty texture, or this red clean texture, or this blue clean texture. Oh, I clicked the wrong one. That's all personal preference. You can choose whichever one you want. So long as he has one of these 4 textures, you'll get full texture points. But I did want to bring that to your attention, so you can change those for this project, for the final, whatever you like. Those are there for you. I'm just going to take him back to this rusty one. That one's my favorite. All right. So first thing we have to do is we have to be able to see our pose, make sure that we can see it clearly. There's a couple of things we can do. We can make sure that our panels are set as a layout of side by side, so we can see a perspective view. I'm going to make a new camera because I want to be able to see from multiple angles. Maybe this one over here is going to be my render view, and this one over here is my perspective. I need to be able to toggle between the two of them at any given point so that I can make sure that my poses are coming across as clear as possible. Something else you can do, especially those of you at home and those of you in here, I will not be doing this because you guys will not be able to see what I'm doing. If this is too much and you can't see far enough on your screen, you can also come over here to panels and tear off a copy. This way you can have a third window, or you can have 2 larger windows that you can play with at the same time. Since you guys cannot see my third screen, I'm just going to leave mine as these 2 right here in the middle. Other things that we will definitely need to do for this project that I'm not going to start with, but I do recommend you guys use for this project and your final, is definitely get some reference of yourself or of a video that you find on the internet. Find some sort of reference anytime you're going to be creating an animation just in general. It can be a really simplistic animation. It can be for a super complicated one or something more like BenBot here. But having reference will really help you make sure that your timing, the facial expressions you might need, as well as any other physical maneuvers, we'll say that you might encounter to be able to tell what is and is not physically feasible. So let's go ahead and figure out how we need to start this. So right now, BenBot is in that kind of T-pose position, right? And you notice on my timeline here, my timeline looks like I can see 0, but I'm starting at frame 1. I'm going to go ahead and go to frame 0. And I'm just going to go ahead and keyframe this whole pose inside of that T-pose. The reason we're doing this on frame 0 is because when we go to render, we're going to start on frame 1 and go all the way through for as long as we need. If we already have our BenBot here, or our rig in general, back at that T-pose with a keyframe, if we mess up, we can erase all of those keyframes except for that original, and we go back to scratch. If we just have the normal keyframes and not have this keyframed, if we mess up, we're going to have to go back through and manually zero out all of his controls. That sounds tedious. So now that I have my frame 0 keyframed on this T-pose, I'm going to take this back so that I'm only seeing from frame 1 on. I know that that pose is there, but I will not be able to edit it now that I have this change. And what I want to do is go ahead and take BenBot here, and I want to put him in a more relaxed position. So I'm going to maybe lean him forward. Bend his arm a little bit. Elbow. Now, as just a word of wisdom, or in case y'all do not know, if these controls are too big and you can't click on what you need to click, you can hit the plus and minus size to scale them up or down. So if you have multiple smaller controls all within an area and you need to click one and you can't because it's moving your machine or your rigs around, you can minimize that with the plus and minus just so that you can get closer to those rig parts. Now, even though BenBot does not have any fingers, we still do need to change his overall finger positions to make him feel a little bit more natural. So I'm just going to slightly curve his hand in, lower him a little bit, tilt his hips. I'm definitely thinking about that contrapposto that we were doing the other day. Making sure we're rolling our shoulder as needed. Maybe moving one of these feet out a little bit. Just to get something that feels a bit more natural. Then, once we've got to this point, we're going to go ahead and just re-keyframe all of our controls. Other things you might need to know, depending on which version of BenBot or what rig you might be using. You normally don't see the full white of an eye unless something is super scared or surprised. So just be aware that if you are working with a character with eyes, like Hobo or any other eyed character, you probably won't see that much of the white or a lot of pupil unless they're super excited. Also, keep in mind your silhouette. We want to make sure that we are able to see all of the parts of our character. That way we can accurately see what is happening inside of our animation. This chair is going to make me fall. It is right behind me. Other small tidbits of information that might be helpful to you guys in the future. If you are rigging or working with a rig and all you are seeing are the feetsies, do you need to render or animate the face? If all you will be seeing in a scene is feet, do you need to move that upper body at all? No. If all you're seeing is the face, do you need to render the legs or work with the legs? Probably not. Be very aware of where your render cam is going to be so that you guys don't work harder. Not that you need to, but so you don't waste time that you could be using to spline, which we'll talk about in a minute. So just be aware of what part you're going to be working on at any given point from your camera angle. If you've got a super complex dragon rig, you don't want to be animating the tail or hindquarters if all you're seeing is that neck and forelimbs, and vice versa. Okay, so let's go ahead and think about what's going to be happening. So we have our nice relaxed pose. In that see, think, do, have we seen our object yet? No. So let's go ahead and have BenBot see this step that he's going to take. So I'm going to go out about maybe 20-ish frames. And I'm going to pose him so that he is seeing where he's going to be stepping. So maybe I'll have him look down. Arm might swing back a little bit. Forearms come up. So now we have our C. So if I use the greater and less than buttons, I can go from our neutral pose to our seeing pose. Alex, is your mic on? Someone said that they can hear you. There you go. I can't hear you, so I don't know. You're good. So we have our neutral and our C. What is the next pose that we need to do? And our C thinking and do?
We have been bot think.
Think about it and then react. So I'm going to, in about 10 frames, have BenBot think about what he'll do. So maybe I'll have him maybe starting to think about his step. So maybe he's up a little bit more. Maybe he's just starting to lift his leg. Maybe even less than that. Yeah, I was about to be like, be careful of that. You can easily destroy BenBot. Example. So just be aware.
I love it when these things work.
So again, just like the last time, I'm keeping mind of my pose. I'm keeping an eye on my silhouette. And then I will keyframe all of those there. Then we need to have that reaction. So he is now 100% committing to that thought of I'm going to step on this object or I'm going to step under this object. So now I need to fully commit to that action. Bring that leg up. Scoot his body forward. Break his knee a little bit. To lift his arms for balance. And just shift his weight over, lift him up a bit. And then set that keyframe. So at this point, we have our neutral pose. We have our seeing pose. our thinking pose, and our doing pose. We are reacting to this object. Question?
So are these meant to be fully flushed out in the end, or do you just want the pose to pose?
We will get there. Yes. All questions will be answered in time. But yes. Answer to, does this need to be fully fleshed out, is yes. Okay. So at this point, I am apparently not doing things. There we go. So this pass that we've just done, about a little bit of the homework for Project 5 together, is a blocking pass. Now, we do not want to hit play at this point. We do not want to give Maya the satisfaction of thinking it knows what in-betweens we want. So what we need to do is right-click on our timeline and make sure we have the Enable Stepped Preview turned on. That way, when we hit play, other than the fact that there's 200 extra seconds, all we will see are our poses. This is a blocking pass. This is the time where we have made all of our poses in that pose-to-pose method. We haven't done anything in the middle. We haven't added anything extra. We haven't tweaked anything. All we're looking for is the overall strong poses and the timing of our step. Now, when you are working in this pose-to-pose method, make sure you're not having the mindset of, oh, I will keyframe this later. You want to craft the entire pose at the same time. So for this pose right here, I made sure all of the things that I would want to be keyframed are keyframed and posed at this exact second when I made this pose. I don't want to come back and be like, or I don't want to start it and have been like, no, this arm down here, that's fine. I'll come back and fix that later. Don't do that. That is bad animation technique. You want to make sure that you're posing everything all at one time, because think of this as if you're drawing that pose. You are crafting this exact second in time on your keyframes. You still might need to change something. I still might come in and be like, no, I kind of really want this to be a bit more like that. Maybe this wrist to be a bit more like that. That's all fine. That's still part of your blocking. You're still crafting that pose, but you still want to make sure that you are posing the entire body at any given time. And then resetting your keyframes. Now, if your Enable Stepped Preview doesn't seem to work, you can also go into the graph editor, highlight all of your keyframes, and put that into the stepped view, which, just as reference, would look like this. So you would highlight all of your colorful spaghetti in here and click this little button right here to step all of your tangents. That way you would only see those pose-to-pose spots. Go away, Hypershade. This is the way to make your blocked animations. It can be a pain to not be able to hit play and see how things are moving in time, but trust me, it will help you focus on the poses themselves. It'll help you craft stronger ones, and your animation will be better for it. You can add moving holds at this point too. So let's say on frame 10, all I want is for BenBot to shift his weight from one ankle to the other. Because I don't want him to do anything at that time. I just want him to be there. So moving holds, while yes, will cause a pause in your animation, are normally just subtler changes to your motion. You don't want to push things too far. This is a good time to exaggerate small things. Like I said, that weight shift. Maybe if he's thinking about something, he can do one of those bounces where his arms kind of swing. Little subtle motions that will add more realism to your animation. Now, as you noticed, when I hit play, only one side of my animation updates. This can be annoying. I'm going to go ahead to my settings and preferences, and my preferences. And again, you can fix that under the time slider, just making sure that the update view is to all. So now if I reset, they both move at the same time. Now let's say you get hired by an animation company and you're like, okay, boss man, what's my first assignment? And they're like, hey, I want you to make this character do a thing. Maybe step on an object or under an object. You're like, okay, cool. When do I need to have this due? You'll be like, oh, the art director is going to say, hey, this project doesn't need to be finished till this point, but I want to see your blocking pass by like tomorrow. I don't know why they would say that for any reason.
Well, that sounds horrible.
That sounds absolutely terrible. Your art director is the person you would normally answer to. Your art director in this class is me. So pretty much, what you would be doing when you're working in the industry is you will be crafting poses for your first pass before your animation director says, hey, yeah, go ahead and finish working on that animation. Everything looks good. You want someone to be able to understand what's happening in your animation. And the best way to do that is to play blast or render your blocking animation and give it to your art director. Remember, your art director is me. Pretty much. I'm not making it mandatory. You don't have to do that for this project. Maybe a different project. I'm not entirely sure. No warning. Foreshadowing, maybe. By next class, all you have to do is turn in your blocking pads. This is just to give me an idea of what your animation is going to look like if you're doing a step over or a step under. It doesn't have to be the final posing. It doesn't have to be the actual end camera. I just want to see your overall process of where you're at with this animation, just by next class. It can be a play blast. You can even turn it in as an AVI if you want to, either to the server or just into the place where you would turn it in on D2L. Again, I won't be making it mandatory for this project. I don't know for shadowing on next project, but just be aware that is something that you can do. It will not affect your grade. It will not give you points. It will not lose you points if you do not turn those in. But it is that first step to making an overall animation. Well, what would happen after your blocking pass? The next pass after blocking is called splining and in-betweening. This is the graph editor. Maya tries to do that and help to the best of its ability for you. So if, for instance, I were to come over here and turn off that stepped preview. So this is a different project of BenBot that I have. It's got a similar setup to the one we were doing together. So I have BenBot here. If I hit play to take a look at the in-betweens that Maya has set, it's not bad. It's definitely not what I would want overall. It's got some poppiness to it. Some parts don't look too good. We need to come in and spline it. Now, splining is just taking the graph editor and making the graph editor do what you want it to do. But I highly recommend having that render cam here and that secondary cam. And what you need to do before you start splining anything is double check your poses. How on earth do we do that? Well, if we come into our render cam here and come up to that grease pencil, we need to check our contrapposto. So I know for a fact I did not do contrapposto well in this version of this project. So if I use this grease pencil on each of my keyframes, so on this first one, my hips and my shoulders are pretty parallel. Remember from our pose-to-pose lecture, this meant boring. So what we would need to do is come in here and change some of these. Now it can, remember, be a little more subtle, but we do want to come in and on each of our overall frames, each pose that we made, we want to double check that contrapposto. So I know, again, very straight, very parallel. I need to come in and change those. So that I get a more interesting contrapposto for all of my poses. You want to do this before you start working in the graph editor, because once you start tweaking in the graph editor, other smaller things such as this can kind of get lost in your posing. You might be changing where certain keyframes are. You might be changing their timing, their spacing, their overlapping action. You want to do this before you start doing any of those other things. So I'm going to come over here to this one. And I'm going to say, ooh, this one's the same. Need to change the rotation of these hips a bit. Draw those on. Much better. And we just need to go through and double check that all of our contrapposto is looking as nice as it needs to be. Now this might mean you might have to shift some of your poses to make it look a little bit more natural. I highly recommend turning on auto key for subtle shifts like that in this part. I, again, am not a fan of auto key, but I will admit it is very handy for shifting small, subtle changes to your contrapposto and poses. So I'm going to turn that on. I'm going to go to my next pose, double check this one's contrapposto. Again, parallel, very boring. Going to come in here, rotate some of these, which means I'll have to fix one of my arms here to make sure that that acts a little bit more naturally. Counterbalances. Checking the contrapposto again, much better, even though it's subtle. Same on this pose, going to check that contrapposto. Oh, parallel again. I'm going to rotate that head a little bit. Check those. Much better. And then on our last one, oh no, it's still parallel. Let's rotate some stuff again. Means I might have to fix an arm. And then now our contrapposto is a little better. Ooh, why did that happen? Interesting.
I like that filter.
Yeah, that's neat. Let's turn that off. Okay.
What happens when you render it?
I don't know. Let's find out. This is new. Ah, filter's gone. I bet there's a small bit of grease pencil on the lens. Neat. Nope, not that. All right, cool. I guess it's just blue now. All right. He's blue, Dabadi. He is. If he was green, he would die. So once you've checked your contrapposto, this will ensure that you have nice, strong poses, which then again, and in turn, make sure you have strong animation because you won't have to work as hard with your in-betweens. Again, adding extra hold frames can help your animation. It also can hinder them sometimes. If there's no motion at all during them, having subtle motion will help keep it from feeling unnatural. Remember, if a moving hold is mostly still, not fully still. This is also another time where you want to triple and double check your timing. You want to make sure that you're figuring out where you want certain eases, where you want certain things to be slower or faster, because you want to make sure that you're the one in control of Maya and not Maya in control of you or in your animation, regardless of the blue filter. Now, make sure if you are moving your animation parts, make sure you're moving the whole drawing, that whole pose. That way, if you are using this auto key, you're setting all your keyframes regardless on each of these poses to make sure that you're not going to have any issues of things moving when they shouldn't be moving. The two most often mistakes that I see with this project is you don't set your project, which can in turn make BenBot not have his texture. It can break BenBot's texture, and sometimes it can break his rig. But also, you're not setting a keyframe on all of your controls, just the one that you're moving. Make sure for every pose you make, you're setting a keyframe regardless of if you've moved something. But also, sometimes with BenBot, if it happens to you, please let me know immediately so we can get it fixed. Sometimes his skin comes off of his rig, so you'll be moving the rig and suddenly his body just won't be moving anymore. If that happens, contact me immediately. It is a thing, it has happened. It happens maybe like once a semester. If it happens to you, contact me immediately. There is a fix, but it will require a little bit more work, or you can start from scratch. I'd rather that you be able to save your work and not have to start from scratch. So just depending on where it is, those are your options. Jeremy, you're good. You're good. I do recommend watching just the tail end of the video. But yeah, you're good. There's no big announcements that I'm aware of. Some other things to keep in mind when you are working with character animation just in general. Triple check your timing before you start playing with your curves. You don't want to be moving your curves, offsetting keyframes, and then realizing that your step onto your platform or underneath something is like 4 seconds off. Make sure you're checking that before you commit to any big changes. Also, make sure you're watching your animation objectively. You don't want to get too attached to one particular movement and then focus so hard into that the rest of your animation suffers. Ways that you can get around that is every now and then get out from your computer, take a couple steps back, and watch it from further away. You can sometimes catch mistakes the further back you are. You can also mirror it. So you can render a play blast, take it into Premiere and flip it, or you can just go get a big mirror, take your computer or laptop into the bathroom and watch it in the mirror. Sometimes seeing it just from a different angle will help you find imperfections. A lot of artists do this. If they're working digitally, they'll flip the canvas. You want to do the exact same thing. Just because you're animating doesn't mean you have any other issues that would fix you from doing that. And then, once you've checked all those things, your timing's right, your poses are strong, your contrapposto looks good, everything's exactly aligned between the planets, you're ready to go, you're ready to start splining in that graph editor. All splining is looking through each control on your character and checking its graph. That's all it is. When you are working with a character, such as this, how I highly recommend splining is just checking all of your curves systematically. So you want to make sure that all of your curves, all of that spaghetti you have in here, all this, if you have that enable step preview turned on, you could now turn it off after you've reached all of your poses. You've gotten everything ready. Everything's done. Contrapposto's nice. If you're using the step tangent view here, you just go in, take it back to auto, and you're like, yes, I'm ready to see what Maya's got for me. I highly recommend watching it through once, then play blasting it before you touch anything. Being like, I want to see this in real time. I highly recommend play blasting it and calling it something like, for this guy, bin bot, blocking, finished. Why you do this is every time you spline or do a splining pass, you'll see very subtle changes. But you won't notice them if you're not rewatching the older animations. I highly recommend every time you do a full splining pass, you make a play blast, or every hour, or every 2 hours, some way that you can see the passage of time in your animations. So, BenBot here maybe has what, like 30-ish controls, roughly. The best way to go about splining a humanoid type character is to start in the center. I really wish I could see him better, and I have no idea why I turned him blue. I'm gonna Google it. Why Maya turned blue? No one knows. Awesome.
Maybe it has something to do with your renderer?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe try switching between before and normal.
Let's try that. See if.
Oh, it's even more blue now.
The answer is blue. Dude, I didn't know Smurf's floor was gonna have like a robot in it.
This is just a weird one. Let's see here. I wonder if I changed something in here. No, it would not let me. So I can delete. Delete. Huh. Interesting. Did I change a color in my sky dome? No. I changed the background color in my thingy here? No. Oh well. That's fine. Cool. Okay. Anyway, I'll Google that and figure out what the heck went wrong with that. So what I recommend. Yeah, I tried the wireframe. It still stays blue. So yeah, it's weird. That's fine. Ooh. So just for instance, if we were to start splining this and start checking the curves, where do you all think you would start? Now, when you're splining, before you give me an answer, you are checking every single curve, whether or not you've put animation on it or not. Where would you start?
Front.
The front? That's an idea. Where else would you start?
From the side?
From on a side? In the middle? You can really start wherever you like. I do highly recommend for humanoids starting in the torso. So you could start on the top here. Move to the center. So let's say I look at this top curve here. When you're splining, you pick your curve and then go through each of the curves themselves. So I can tell my X, my Y, and my Z is where all of my keyframes are on this particular curve. Hello, Train. Thank you for joining me today. Welcome to my TED Talk. So in this rotate X, if I look at my curve here, my curve kind of looks like a roller coaster. I'm pretty sure when we went over the graph editor, I said if the graph looks like a roller coaster and can kill you, something's not right. That rule still applies. You might need to change something about your graph. So if I'm like, ooh, I think right here on 30, this might be a little much. I can smooth and retime that as needed to get a better animation. I could then go to my Y here. Ooh, that's really high. Maybe I just need to move that down, maybe curve it a little bit, and get a more natural animation. And then same thing in my Z. Maybe this is a little too low. Maybe I need to roll that up. And already I can see a slight change to my animation. I would then go down to my next curve, and the next one, and the next one, and slowly go through the full center part of my animation. You can then go any way that you really want. You can go right C's to left C's. You can go ups to downs. You can do right foot, right arm, left foot, left arm. You can do left foot, right arm, whatever you like. I do highly recommend starting in the middle though, and moving either one way or the other, up or down. But so long as you are doing all of your controls, including eyes, things that don't move, you'll slowly start seeing subtle changes to your animation. This first pass through all of your curves is your first splining pass. Like I said, it might be subtle. It might be so subtle that you might not do anything on a specific curve. So I know if I click on this shoulder here, there's really nothing going on there. I still need to check it just in case I do need to change it because I might have changed something on another part of the body. Questions so far? Just in general. Okay. So when you're working on your animations, the normal route you will take when you are working on an animation is you will have blocking, timing, double checking your blocking, your first spline pass, and then another spline pass, and another spline pass, and another spline pass, and another spline pass, until you're at a time and someone tells you you need to go render. When you slowly go through your entire animation, you need to also be making sure you're checking for anticipation. Do you need more exaggeration at one point? Do you need less exaggeration at others? Do you need to add any keys? Do you need to remove some keys? Do you have any double keys anywhere? You just need to do this systematically, control by control, and eventually your animation will start looking really, really nice. You might need to add overlapping action. Maybe your Benbot is a little too eager. Maybe he leads with his head. Maybe he's a little floppy, leads with his foot. Think about how things need to be offset inside of your curves to change your animation to match the emotion and acting that you are doing through him. Now, this might be tedious. Every concentration in digital media you could ever come across has something tedious in it. For some people, it's creating UVs. For when you're rigging, it might be painting skin weights. If you work in Photoshop a lot, it might be painting masks. For animation, it's splining. Somewhere in everything you do in this kind of concentration inside of this degree does have some moderation of tedium. For visual effects, it's caching times and filming, etc. You could be here for hours, and it'll either feel like hours or it'll feel like no time has passed. depending on how you take splining into your own hands. I highly recommend throwing on some rock into your headphones and just going to town. There has been many a time when I have been splining and Jenny will come into my office and be like, what are you doing? And I'll be like, I'm working. She's like, your music was playing like 3 hours ago. You've been sitting here in the quiet. What are you doing? Oh, my playlist must have ended. Sometimes that happens. So just be aware, time can either pass really quick or not at all. Overall, your animation pipeline should look like this. Blocking to get the posing, blocking to get the timing, the first splining pass, a couple more splining passes, and then your polish. Now we say polish, but it's really just more splining. It's not really a thing, it's just splining some more, and splining some more, and splining some more, and splining some more. You pretty much just spline and keep splining till you just run out of time. All projects have to end eventually, regardless of whether or not you think they're done or not. You run out of time. In this class, you have due dates, and other classes still have due dates. In your own personal lives, sometimes you just got to say, okay, I'm out of time. I have to start working on something else. Otherwise, I'm never going to have some cool animations to put in my demo reel. Sometimes you just run out of time. Stuff's never really done, ever, even in art and modeling. Nothing's ever done. You still want to tweak things, but sometimes you just have to say, okay, render it. It's done. Render up until you have, or spline up until you have no more time. But give yourself time to render. I highly recommend getting all your splining done and then have 24 hours to render. That way if something goes wrong, it renders from the wrong camera, you have time. Now, more about polish, they are small changes that are felt, not seen. This could be blinking of a character, small twitches of your knuckles as you move your fingers, which pinky moves first, this one or this one in an animation. Very subtle things that we feel. It can be slight shifts of weight from one side of the foot to the other. This is the polish pass. It's a very subtle thing. Overlapping action helps. Compacting of things helps. Again, that's how your pinkies move. Does this part move a little bit faster than this part? Very small things. Now, I highly doubt anyone's going to have time to get that complex in this class. It has happened in some of the senior level animation classes, so that is something you can look forward to. You do get a little bit more time to work toward that. However, all that is just based off time. I highly think you guys could get to that point in this class if you just had more time. But you don't. The example that I'll give you on that is in the industry. Let's say you're working for a company that does both games and movies and all other sorts of stuff. Someone comes up to you and they're like, hey, I need you to animate this character running across somewhere. Maybe they're running across train tracks. I don't know. You have a day. That would be an example of a mobile game. You maybe have an hour. Get this person across those tracks. Not an hour. Mobile game. Let's say you're doing it for a game cinematic. You have about 3 weeks. Have fun. Get it done quick. If you're doing something for Pixar, they might be like, hey, make that guy run across the train tracks. You have 2 months. It's all based on time. All you do is keep going, keep splining, getting those polished on there. This project, you don't have time for that. You have till Thursday. I think, the 5th. You have till the 5th. That's not this Thursday. It's the next Thursday. So you have, yes. So you have all of next week as lab days, and you have Tuesday as a lab day. And then that Thursday, it is due rendered in class. So you don't have a long time, but you don't have not a lot of time.
Although you'll still want our blocky play blast on Tuesday, right?
Yep. So if you turn in that blocky play blast on Tuesday, you get no bonus points whatsoever. Just the satisfaction of knowing you did it. If you don't turn it in, you don't get any negative points. Just the satisfaction you didn't turn anything in. I won't be looking for it. I will be checking once I grade it to see if you turned something in. looking on Tuesday just to see if anyone's turned it in, but I'm not going to yell at y'all about it. Maybe for a different project, foreshadowing, but not this one. Any questions? Would you guys like to see some examples?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to take a screenshot of this and I'm going to send it to Marty and be like, Marty, what new? And he's going to be like, don't know. Because I think once I close this, it's not going to be doing it anymore.
Yep.
All right, examples. Now, something I'm going to point out to you guys. See this tiny little spike on the arm? That is one vertex that wasn't painted with skin weights. If this happens to you, I'll ignore it. But if you want to fix it, let me know. I'll show you how to fix it. This is just an issue that BenBot has. It's just a tiny little spike. It's the only skin weight that hasn't been painted. It's just that one tiny little dot. So if you see this, don't be worried. That's normal. Does that help? All right. Well, that's all I have for the lecture. Again, this is due the 5th. Nice and rendered, ready to go. If you do have any questions, please feel free to let me know. I'll be around. I will be in here physically, at least maybe Tuesday or Thursday. But if I'm not, I will be on Zoom. It depends. She's getting stressed out. She wants me to pack stuff. I'm like, we got 3 weeks. You're good. She's like, no. So if I'm not here, just know I'm packing a box, but I'll have Zoom on me. But that's all I have. Y'all can feel free to head out. If you've got questions about the project, stick around. If you don't, have a good day. See you later. I'm going to stop my share in my recording.